Lesson 20. David and Goliath. The Lord saveth not with sword and spear. Reading 1 Samuel 17. Objective. This well-known story will show us how faith in God can help us overcome all obstacles and help us appreciate the ultimate victory of Christ over sin. Background. The Philistines had once again become oppressors of Israel in the time of Saul. They had even forbidden Israel to make their own instruments of agriculture or weapons. 1 Samuel 13 verses 19 to 20. In the time of battle there was neither sword nor spear among the people. Verse 22. The Philistines gathered their army together and sent out a challenge to Israel. The Philistine challenge, 1 Samuel 17 verses 1 to 3. The Philistines were invading and conquering Israel as they went. Saul gathered the men of Israel together against the invasion. The two armies met at the valley of Elah, and each army encamped in the mountains on opposite sides of the valley. A stalemate was reached, for neither side would leave their strong defensive position to descend into the valley and attack the enemy from beneath them. Goliath, the man of flesh. 1 Samuel 17 verse 4 to 11. Goliath, the Philistine champion, came forward with a challenge to solve the deadlock. He would fight any soldier of Israel in a single combat to decide the battle. The nation of the losing warrior would then become the servants of the winning side. Verse 9. Goliath was a terrifying sight. Verse 11. He was 6 cubits and a span tall, around 3 meters tall. With armor made of brass covering his body, his mighty cry struck terror in the hearts of the men of Saul's army. They were dismayed and greatly afraid. Verse 11. Day after day for 40 days he bellowed his challenge and scorn across the valley. Verse 16. Saul, as king and champion of the people, should have accepted the challenge. The people had said to Samuel, "We will have a king over us, that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles." 1 Samuel 8 verses 19 to 20. Where now was the king who stood head and shoulders above his people? Samuel chapter 10 verse 23. Even the mighty warriors among the troops of God were afraid to take up the challenge. In defying the armies of Israel, Goliath had defied the God of Israel. Verse 26. But no one had the faith to go out and fight with Yahweh's help. What does Goliath represent? In this chapter, the words 6 and brass are frequently used in describing Goliath. He was 6 cubits and a span tall, in verse 4. He had 6 items of armor. Verses 5 to 7. His armor of brass included his helmet, his brass of mail, greaves of brass on his legs, a target of brass between his shoulders. His weapons were a spear and sword, with his shield carried by a shield bearer. Verse 7. Both 6 and brass are symbols used of the flesh as the source of sin. Goliath represented the strength of the flesh and the power of sin which boasts itself against the ways of God. David comes to the battle. 1 Samuel 17 verses 12 to 37. Although David had played the harp in Saul's presence, he was still too young to be part of Saul's army and had returned home in the time of battle to care for his father's sheep. Jesse sent him back with food for his brothers. Verse 17 to 18. So at that time he heard the boastful challenge of Goliath. Verse 23 to 25. How did David react to the challenge of Goliath? David was ashamed that for 40 days no one in Israel had dared to stop this reproach. For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? Verse 26. Eliab, his brother, was angry when he heard David's bold words. No doubt he was ashamed of his own cowardice and tried to hide behind a rebuke. But David's heart was full of faith that his God would help him. News of David's words reached the ears of the king, and he sent for him. Verse 31. Let no man's heart fail because of him, David fearlessly announced. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. Verse 32. Saul thought that David had misjudged the situation. What chance is a mere stripling against such a warrior? To Saul it was a foolish offer, but it was Saul who had misjudged David's God. Nothing is impossible with him. David recalled that twice before Yahweh had helped him save his flock from the attacks of a lion and a bear. And this fleshly Philistine shall be as one of them. Verses 34 to 36. Now with this attack on David's flock, surely Yahweh would be with him again. David's main concern was that this man had dared to defy the living God of Israel, and this insult must be wiped out. Yahweh that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. Verse 37. David prepares to meet Goliath. 1 Samuel 17 verses 38 to 40. Saul made an attempt to prepare David for a man-to-man combat. He put his armour on David, but this was not the weapons and armour he was used to. He had not proved them. The preparation needed for the contest was not to be in the strength of armour or weapons, for no human could conquer the power of this giant. So David excused himself and set out in shepherd's clothes to find Goliath. His confidence was in Yahweh, but he knew he must play his part. Taking his staff and sling and 5 smooth stones out of the stream, he drew near to the Philistine. What was David thinking as he went out to meet Goliath? In Psalms 144, see the Septuagint heading. We have the thoughts of David recorded as he went out to battle. Although he was probably only a little older than you, he was a young man of great spirituality. These were some of the ideas that came to his mind. It was Yahweh who would teach his fingers to fight, verse 1. He would sling the stone, but Yahweh would be with him. Goliath, though a giant, was vanity, and his days would pass as a shadow, verse 4. He sought Yahweh to help him and deliver him from Goliath, whose mouth spoke deceit. In verses 5 to 8. David would give all the praise to Yahweh, verses 9 to 10. There would be great blessings for Israel when Goliath and sin was defeated. Verses 12 to 14. There was great happiness for him and his people because Yahweh was their God. Verse 15. With this total reliance on Yahweh, how could David fail? The conflict. 1 Samuel 17 verses 41 to 54. The champion could hardly believe his eyes as David came out. Am I a dog that thou comest to me with sticks? And he cursed David by his gods. Verse 43. It was this issue alone that would decide the contest. It was not a struggle between one man and another. It was between the power of the gods of the Philistines and the power of the living God. David knew that God's honour must be upheld, and it was this that gave David the courage to fight. Thou comest to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of Yahweh of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. Verse 45. The Philistines must learn this, and all Israel must acknowledge that Yahweh saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is Yahweh's, and he will give you into our hands. Verses 46 to 47. Goliath of Gad was now forced to meet the challenge. David ran to meet him. He chose a stone from his bag and, taking aim, struck the giant in the only exposed and vulnerable part of his body, his forehead. He crashed to the ground. David continued to run towards him, drew out Goliath's own sword and killed him by cutting off his head. Verse 51. A great shout went up from the men of Israel. What a change of heart now as they chased the fleeing army down the valley, killing and wounding them, and came back to collect the spoil from their tents. Goliath's monstrous head was eventually buried near Jerusalem, the site where sin itself was destroyed by the crucifixion of Christ was called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. Basic Bible teaching: Christ's victory over sin. David's experiences make him a type of Christ. His contest with Goliath types or acts out, as in a play, the contest between Christ and the power of flesh. Flesh is the Bible term for the mortal nature we bear, which is inclined to sin. Jesus had human nature the same as ourselves. Hebrews 2 verse 14. He was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. Hebrews 4:15. David struck Goliath in the head, the very place where thoughts of sin begin. It is in the mind where we determine to serve ourselves or serve God. In Romans 8 verses 6 to 8, we have described the mind of the flesh and the mind of the spirit. The mind of the flesh is against God, so Jesus Christ gained the victory over sin in his mind. In Jesus Christ, God's way of thinking always prevailed. He never allowed the natural thinking of the flesh to distract him from doing God's will. He overcame every temptation to sin. 1 Peter 2 verse 22. This is what was meant back in the Garden of Eden when it was said that the seed of the woman would bruise the head of the serpent. Genesis 3 verse 15. Christ overcame every thought that was not truth. His life was a victory over sin. He was so convinced that God was right that he submitted to everything God required of him, even to death by crucifixion. So, for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of God. Hebrews 12 verse 2. The promised joy of being completely at one with his Father strengthened the faith of the Lord to overcome. In Christ's victory over sin, the way was open for all those who are baptized into Christ to partake of the promise of life eternal. Mark 16 verse 16 and Galatians 3 verses 27 to 29. Principle for living: the warfare of faith. We do not have to go out and fight a battle of the flesh like David did, but every day we have to go out and fight the battle against sin. We all know the feeling: the good that I wish I do not, but I practice the very evil that I do not wish. Romans 7 verse 9, the NAS Bible. Sin is everything that is in opposition to God. and so often our thoughts are. How can we learn from the victory over Goliath? Because our warfare is fought in the mind, our weapons are those of the spiritual warrior, the whole armour of God. See Ephesians 6, verses 13 to 17. Faith is our essential piece of armour, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. Ephesians 6, verse 16. Those fiery darts aim to destroy us. Though we may not realize it, our faith will be our defense. We need to follow the faith of the teenager David, who believed that, if God be for us, who can be against us? Romans 8, verse 31. He believed it and demonstrated it in his actions. We have the equivalent of a Goliath in the world about us, with all its allurements. The world boasts of its might and human achievements. It provides a lifestyle that is for self-satisfaction and fleshly appeal. Like David, we need faith to defeat it. Do we have the faith to say no to its offers of satisfaction of our lusts? Can we resist the temptation to be involved in immorality? When we get invited to nightclubs, movie theatres, and spectator sporting events, do we have the courage to say no? We can only overcome by faith. And this is the victory that overcometh the world, even our faith. 1 John 5, verse 4. We can only develop the faith that overcomes all by applying our minds to the Word of God like David did. Daily meditation and prayer are essential to increasing our faith. Summary. Saul and the men of David lacked the faith to go out and meet the Philistine warrior. It was the youth, David, who was able to trust in Yahweh to help him as he had in past experiences. David's victory points forward to the great victory of Christ over sin. These lessons are the words taken from the Christadelphian Sunday School Association notes, www.cssa.asn.au, used with permission. Email your questions to readthebible2@gmail.com, and we look forward to you listening to the next lesson, which will be called David and Jonathan.